I think there's a lot of people who, because of the way we use the words believe and faith and at times their interchangeability, that we have a tendency to equate our ability to think God could do something with faith that he will do something. And the two are not the same. They're completely different. Charles Price was a great faith healer in the 1930s, healed tens of thousands of people, traveled the country. And here's what Charles Price said. The mistake with many is that they confuse Christ's imparted faith with their mental ability to believe. Now, let me just say, here's what happens when you and I are fasting. There's different kinds of faith. Maybe you've never thought of this, but it's very important to understand this. There's saving faith. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. There's a faith that saves you, that you believe God for salvation. You can't get saved unless you have that. That moment that says, I'm going to do this. I believe he's going to save me. I believe if I go to him, he'll save me. That is not of you, it's of God. It's a gift of God, Ephesians says, so no one can boast. Then there's faith for serving. There's a serving faith. Every man should serve, he talks in Romans chapter 12, according to the faith given him. So you have faith to serve. Well, I believe I could do that. I believe I could. It takes faith to serve as a host. It takes faith to do anything you're doing in the church, because it's more than just like if you're out in the parking lot, it's more than parking cars. People can figure that out. They do it every day at Walmart. You're not there. They know they're not there to park cars. They're there to minister to people, to welcome them. That takes faith. So there's a faith for serving. Then there is a supernatural faith that brings about supernatural miracles. What fasting does, what spending time in the presence of the Lord does. And this is why fasting and prayer, why it goes together, is because when you're fasting, anybody who's done it knows you become more sensitive to the presence of the Lord. You're like hungry, and you're like, man, I'm so hungry. And then it reminds you of why you are hungry. And the reason why is because you're seeking the Lord. And you're like, oh Lord, I'm fasting and I'm believing. And what happens is through that interchange over time, you begin to move into the presence of the Lord, and he begins to infuse you with the power that's his power, not your power, that helps you to do what you couldn't do any other way, right? So here's what he says. To sit down and repeat, I am healed, I am healed, I am healed, is not only unscriptural, but spiritually dangerous. I admit that such a spiritually unsound method might help a few neurotics, but it would never remove the mountain that the master said faith would. Isn't it evident that when we have prayed what we thought was the prayer of faith and nothing happened, it must be that what we thought was faith was not faith at all? Did Jesus say that faith as a grain of mustard seed would work sometimes and not at others? Read the text again. His declaration was plain and specific. There was nothing ambiguous about it. It was a clear statement of fact from the lips of the eternal God himself. And who can speak with greater authority than he can? Whenever and wherever this faith is active, we won't be standing around poor sick folks hour after hour, rebuking, commanding, struggling, and pleading. As in the past, when Christ's faith is imparted, the storm dies down and there's peace in the soul. The only sound is the voice of thanksgiving and praise. That's when we realize it wasn't our ability to believe that made the sickness go, but that Christ's faith was given. Then it will be morning, glorious morning in our soul. You can't work yourself up into a greater place of faith. Now, I think you can build yourself up with the Word of God. You can strengthen your faith. But when we're talking about supernatural faith, this comes from the Lord. It comes from him. Now back to Matthew, and I want you to look at this for just a moment. For truly I say to you, if you have faith like A grain of mustard seed. How big's a mustard seed? I got a little thing of mustard seed. So I don't know whether the camera, whether you can see it there. And, oh, that one you will never see. There, can you see that? Oh, it rolled off. Whoa. Can you see it? You can see it. Just, here, I'll let him fall. You can see him. You know how much faith you have to move a mountain? Right there. So let's not make this complicated. You know, the disciples, we're going to look at this later. Lord, increase our faith. And Jesus is like, you know, let's not make this too hard. You only have to have this much. That's all you need. Just a little tiny bit of faith. If it's the real thing, will move that mountain. You will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. And nothing. You say, well, I've got this situation and I just don't, nothing. You say, but I've seen somebody and nothing. Nothing will be impossible. Nothing will be impossible. Nothing will be impossible. And then, verse 21, but this kind never comes out except, but. Nothing's impossible, but. You know, it's not automatic. Nothing's impossible, but this kind never comes out except by prayer and fasting. Mark 9:29, he replied, this kind can come out only by prayer and fasting. So what's that tell us about the disciples? They're not praying and they're not fasting, so they can do some things sometime, but they can't do things other times. That's the lesson. That's why we have to fast. And when we do, mountains will move. What is your mountain? What is it that hasn't happened? You've prayed about it, but it hasn't happened. You've asked God for it, but it hasn't come. What answer is it? You say, well, I prayed before. Well, then pray again and fast. You say, I've fasted before. Then believe God that this is the time that, you know, listen, we go from glory to glory. So your faith is going to get strengthened, but you don't need a lot. You only need a little tiny bit of faith. And when you spend time in the presence of the Lord, you're going to get a little bit of faith that will move the mountain.